Hello, good evening. My name is Catherine Kaplan. I am working with SEB Housing, and this is the information session for the 29 affordable rental housing units at the Alexan in Kingston. And it's located at 1 Kingston Collection Way in Kingston, Massachusetts. So the purpose of this session is to give a little bit of background information on the affordable units. And we're also going to discuss the application process, the eligibility process, and also the lottery, what's expected after the lottery. So we're in a YouTube live session. If you have any questions during the session, you're not able to unmute yourself or anything like that, but you're able to type any questions into the chat box that you see to the right of the video. So I'm going to type something in there now just so you can see the field that I am talking about. So it should be up on your screen. We also have a conference call that is running concurrently during this information session. So if you prefer to join by phone, you can do that. And you can access that conference call by the number that is now in the chat box. So the live session is going to be saved to YouTube following the information session tonight. So if you're watching this after the fact and you want to get in touch with SEB, you can contact us at info@sebhousing.com. And that email address is now in the chat box as well. Or if you'd like to get in touch with us by phone, that's perfectly fine as well. And you can call us at the number that I'm going to put in the chat box as well. So you have our contact information following the session. So I just want to start out by giving a little bit of background information on who we are. So SEB Housing is a off-site affordable housing consulting group. We're not the on-site management team at Alexan or the leasing office for the building, but we've been hired by the developer to market the affordable units, conduct this information session, and review applications and determine an applicant's eligibility before we run the lottery. So in the initial phases, we are your main point of contact rather than the management or leasing office. But further along in the process, the on-site management or leasing team is going to take over as your main contact for these affordable apartments. So there's two broad steps in the process. The first is applying for the housing program. And so during that step, that's when you're going to be in touch with SEB Housing. And we can answer any questions you might have on the affordable housing program, on the application, the documents that you need to submit. And we're going to be reviewing your application and the supporting documentation you send in. And if you're eligible, you're going to be entered into the lottery, and we will be giving you a position on a waiting list. Step two, you're going to be in contact with the leasing office to determine your lease eligibility, which is separate from the screenings that SEB Housing conducts. And that might, include credit history, rental history, criminal background checks, things like that, the normal type of thing that you're used to potentially with renting an apartment in the past. And so once approved, you'd be working with the leasing office or management team to reserve and lease the apartment. It looks like we have a question if there's any soundproof windows or walls. I do not know that. We can get back to you on that though. So if you want to email us at info@sebhousing.com, that is a question that I don't have the answer to right now. It is a new build, a new property, Alexan, but I don't know. So if you could, like I said, email us at the email address that's in there, info@sebhousing.com. We'll be able to check in with the leasing office and the management team over at Alexan to get you that answer. So if you haven't already, please go to our website, sebhousing.com. You can find the application for this opportunity. And I'm going to put that in there now. So if you click on I want to rent and select Alexan Kingston, there is a page specifically dedicated to this listing. So the application, there's a downloadable version of this application. There's also the information packet, which has a lot of the information that I'm going to be reviewing tonight. So take a look at those, even if you have watched this information session or you're watching it tonight. It is recommended that you take a look at the information packet so you have a better understanding of all the steps in this process. So if you choose to apply for one of the affordable units at Alexan, you're first going to need to complete that lottery application, and you can submit it in one of several ways. So you can do that by emailing or scanning it to us at info@scbhousing.com. You can fax it to us. Our fax number is on the first page of the application. You can send it by regular mail to our address that's on the application, or you can drop it off at our 24-hour secure drop box at our office in Needham. And that is that's at 257 Hillside Ave. And it's located to the left of our building. We do check that drop box every day if you prefer to do it that way. So you can pick whichever option is most convenient for you. And we do encourage you to get the lottery application in early. It's fairly lengthy. You're going to see that there's a lot of supporting documentation that you need to get in with your application. And we're going to talk a lot more about that during this presentation. So the applications for this opportunity are due by 2 p.m. on May 31st, and they must be delivered or postmarked by that date in order to be considered for the lottery. You do not need to be a Kingston resident to apply for this lottery, although there are going to be several units at this property that have local preference, meaning that residents of Kingston will have a preference, and we're going to discuss that later on in further detail. You may also want to check out the website, the development's website. And I'm going to put that in the chat as well. I see there's a couple things in there. The Alexan Kingston Apartments.com website, the developer and the owner have put on more information about amenities at the property, a photo gallery, information about the neighborhood, things like that. So it'll be helpful for you to go ahead and check that out if you haven't already. And so I see that someone asked how long this whole process will be. And Dave, my colleague here, has mentioned that it really depends on where you are in the wait list and all of that. So we're going to keep we're going to talk about a lot of this information during the session tonight. But my understanding is the units are fairly close to being ready. So that's a good thing. You're going to have to submit a application and supporting documentation and all of that, but the process shouldn't be too lengthy once you've done that. So a little bit more about the units themselves. So Alexan Kingston is a newly built apartment community located in Kingston at 1 Kingston Collection Way. So in total, there's going to be 282 units, and 29 of those are going to be made available through this affordable housing lottery. So just about 10% of the units in the community are going to be affordable, and the development offers a variety of different floor plans with well-appointed kitchens, full-size stacked washer and dryers. Residents are also going to have access to a number of the on-site amenities, which include a pool, a fitness center, a tech center, a courtyard with fire pit and grills. There's going to be a pet washing station, package service, and bike storage. And the community provides easy access to Route 3, located right next to the Kingston Collection Shopping Center, and it's close to the Kingston commuter rail station, as well as parks and outdoor spaces in the area. There's one parking space included in the rent for residents, and this is a 4-story building, which does have an elevator. So the affordable units that we're talking about that will be available in this lottery process are studios, 1 bedrooms, 2 bedrooms, and a 3-bedroom apartments. So there are 2 studio apartments, and those feature 661 square feet, and the rent will be $1,631. There are 12 1-bedroom apartments, which feature 781 square feet, and the rent will be $1,839. There's also 12 2-bedroom apartments that will have 1,176 square feet, and their rent will be $2,038. And there's 3-bedroom apartments, which will feature 1,513 square feet, and the rent will be $2,231. There's also several, I see that this question actually just came in too. There are 5 total disability accessible apartments at this, out of these 29 units. There's also 2 sensory accessible apartments. And the question that just came in are the handicap accessible apartments on the lower level. And I believe they are distributed throughout the property. And I don't want to hold up things too much because my computer is being a little strange, but we can get back to you about whether or not there's any on the lower level. Like I said, there are 4 levels, and there is a elevator. There is a elevator in the building, so it's accessible in that way. So we'll get back to you on whether or not they're on the first floor or not. So these rents that I just read off are considerably less than the rents charged for the market rate units within the development. And this particular affordable housing opportunity is not subsidized housing. So you just want to keep that in mind. The affordable rent amounts are not going to change based on any individual applicant's income. If your income fluctuates, the rent is not going to change because of that. So it's not similar to a Section 8 voucher or anything like that. The rents for the housing program are set using a formula that is based on HUD's, which is the Department of Housing and Urban Development. It's based on HUD's area median income, or AMI, for the Boston, Cambridge, Quincy area, which is where Kingston falls. And they're set with the idea that the amount should be affordable, the rent amount should be affordable to households making 80% of the area median income. So the rent may increase once per year, and this typically occurs in the spring when HUD revises the area median income amounts. So when that happens, or before that happens, tenants would always be given, or residents would always be given advance notice of any rent increase. Usually the increases are not more than $25 to $75 per month, so it shouldn't be anything too extraordinary. And you want to keep in mind, rents will never change in the middle of your lease term. So if you, did not agree to that higher amount, you wouldn't need to be locked in again for another year. So the affordable units at Alexan were selected by the owner and were approved by the town and DHCD, which is the Department of Housing and Community Development, as being representative of the units in the building as a whole. So this means that they're not the smallest units in the building. They're not all in one location, shoved in a corner or anything like that. And they're not identifiable as affordable units in any way from the exterior, which is important to most people who are renting. And since it is possible that there'll be more interested applicants and eligible applicants than available units, the apartments are going to be made available through this lottery process. And to qualify for the lottery process, your household income needs to be at or below the 80% of the area median income in Boston. And we're going to touch on those income limits in just a few minutes and how we would calculate your income and all of that. So we've covered a lot of the logistical information as well as a basic overview of the units at Alexan. So before we go on to the eligibility requirements, just a reminder, if you have any questions, you can put them right there in the chat box. I see we do have a couple. Dave has responded here that he's going to take a look at the floor plans about the handicap accessible units and whether or not they're on the lower levels. And then we also have a question about how many people have qualified so far. And we have 12 applications so far, but they're not complete. So we're going to talk about all of that going forward in terms of what a complete application might be. Okay. And there are handicap accessible units on the first floor for anybody else who was wondering. All right, so the eligibility requirements. I'll take a look at the chat box again in a few minutes to see if there's anything new in there. But the eligibility requirements, so there's 4 basic eligibility requirements or 4 main eligibility requirements that are listed on page 4 of that information packet, which contains most of the information, like I said, that I will be reviewing tonight on this presentation, and the information packet can be found on our website with the listing for Alexan Kingston under rental opportunities. So the first eligibility criteria is that applicants must have a household income that is at or below the 80% of AMI, like we spoke about. We'll talk a lot more about that in just a few minutes. The second item to keep in mind is that household priority will be given based on household composition. So when you fill out the application, you will be indicating your household type, it's called. So you'll either be a type 1, type 2, or type 3. So for example, if you're a one-person household or a couple who shares a bedroom, you're considered a type 1 household. And in addition to studio or 1-bedroom units, you can also apply for 2- and 3-bedroom units if you're interested in those larger apartments. But you just want to keep in mind that being a type 1 household, if you choose to apply for the larger bedrooms, meaning the 2- or 3-bedroom units, that all type 2 and 3 households are going to be placed ahead of you on the 2- or 3-bedroom waiting list. Similarly, if you are a type 2 household, you can go ahead and apply for a 3-bedroom apartment, but just be aware that all type 3 households will have priority on that 3-bedroom wait list. So the idea of the household types is that the larger households are given priority for larger units, and these larger units are not always occupied by people who are overhoused and may not require all of that space or all of those bedrooms. But it's not to say you can't apply for them, because you may be able to rent them in the end. So more information on household types can be found on page 7 of the information packet. The third eligibility criteria is that you may not own a home upon leasing a unit at Alexan. All homes, if you own a home right now, they would need to be sold prior to leasing the unit. So if you're listening to this session and you own a home, you can apply for the lottery. You would just need to make sure that the property was sold prior to signing a lease at Alexan Kingston. And finally, it doesn't come up often, but the fourth eligibility criteria, a household may not have financial interest in the development and can't be considered a related party. So these units are being offered by Trammell Crow Residential. So if you work for them or if you're related to them in some way, you may not be eligible for this lottery. So just keep that in mind. So to circle back on the first eligibility criteria, we're going to talk about the income limits and how we're calculating your income and everything. There's another question there I see that Dave has answered. Yeah, emailing the application in more than one email, that's perfectly fine. All right, so the income limits for this affordable housing program. So as we said, the units are being made available to rent at prices lower than the market rate units within this community. The maximum income limits for the program are set by household size. So this includes everyone who might be who would be living in the unit with you. These amounts, you don't have to write them down or anything like that. They're listed in the information packet, and they're also on the listing on our website. But these are the amounts that change each year and are set by HUD, and that we need to go ahead and use when we're reviewing applications. So the maximum income limit for a one-person household is $78,300. For a 2-person household, the maximum income limit is $89,500. A 3-person household, $100,700. A 4-person household, $111,850. A 5-person household, $120,800, and a 6-person household, $129,750. So all households, all applicants will need to submit supporting income and asset documentation. So the required documents vary a bit depending on your source of income, your financial circumstances, but you want to keep in mind that all households will be required to include copies of your last year's federal tax returns and copies of bank statements for the last 3 months, and that's for all your accounts. Section 2 of the application is very detailed and lists all the information that you'll be required to verify specific income sources. So, for example, it's going to list how many pay stubs you need to send in if you are employed and things like that. So I'm also going to give you a basic overview of how your income will be calculated by SEB when we're doing our program eligibility screening. Income for the program is counted as a projection of your income over the next 12 months, and that's for all household members. That includes income from all household members. And this would include bonuses or overtime, for example, and those might be, income sources that you're not necessarily guaranteed. The only exceptions to this are minors. So anyone under the age of 18 who may be earning a wage in your household, we're not going to count that income because they're minors. Also, dependent full-time students who are working, we would only be counting the first $480 when we're determining income eligibility. So most of full-time student income would be excluded for the most part. We must count gross income, so the amount you make before taxes. So although you don't take that amount home, the full amount of your salary, gross income, is required to be counted according to the program. Everyone's income circumstances are unique, so while some applicants are going to have a consistent weekly salary throughout the year, others are self-employed or work seasonally. So in those circumstances, we may need to look further back in the past to be able to project what the household is going to have as their total annual income for the next 12 months. And specifically for applicants who are self-employed, you will need to complete a profit and loss statement and provide supporting documentation for your business. And there's a template of a sample profit and loss statement included at the end of the application for Alexan Kingston. Your business expenses are considered, so they're taken into account when we're calculating your income, your household income. But for households who are not self-employed, it is always going to be the gross income that we count when determining your total income and comparing that to the maximum income limits for this program. So in general, any income you've been making, we're going to assume you will continue to make going forward, unless we have definitive documentation stating that you're no longer going to be earning that income source. So an example might be a written letter from your employer stating that bonuses or overtime are not going to be paid out in the coming year or will not be allowed. We're not permitted to accept statements from applicants themselves. So for example, if all the documentation that we have on file for you shows that your total household income over the last year was $80,000, and an applicant is saying, they plan to work far less hours in the coming year and they won't be making more than $50,000. We would still need to count the $80,000 as the projected income unless a written statement or some sort of official documentation is submitted proving otherwise. So just keep that in mind. Some sources of income are listed on the application. You just want to take a look at the list that's on there so you're not forgetting anything. You're not forgetting to disclose anything that you may be receiving. So obviously some of those that are listed would come to your mind, but they include wages, self-employment or wages from an employer, Social Security benefits, SSDI, child support, alimony, retirement distributions, unemployment or workman's compensation, pension payments, periodic payments from friends or family. And how would we verify that sort of thing? It would usually come in the form of a statement, written statement from the family member confirming the amount and frequency of those payments. And then any asset income. So if you have bank accounts that are generating interest, we would have to count that towards income as well. There's no minimum income for this affordable housing program. However, most management teams, including Alexan Kingston, want to be sure that all tenants can afford the rent regardless of whether or not the unit is market rate or affordable. The management companies set a minimum household income equivalent to 2.5 times the rent. So these amounts are listed in the information packet as well. But for households looking to rent a studio apartment, the approximate minimum household income is going to be $48,930. For a one-bedroom, $55,170. For a two-bedroom, $61,140. And for a three-bedroom, $66,930. Households that have mobile housing vouchers can disregard these minimum income amounts because they do not apply to you. However, any applicant who does have a housing voucher, you're going to want to check in with the agency that issues your voucher to confirm that the rents are within the agency's payment standards or their maximum rent amounts for your program. And the leasing office will also eventually confirm with your housing agency or housing authority that the rents are permissible for your voucher. But it's going to be best for you to know sooner rather than later if these rents will work for you. You don't want to be disappointed further down the line after the lottery. Applicants without a voucher, though, must have household incomes between the minimum incomes, the floor, and program maximum income limits. So the only real exception to this is that households with incomes just below the minimum income amounts. So if a household is close to the minimum income amounts but has liquid assets that they might be able to access in order to afford the monthly rent, their application may be considered by the Alexan leasing office. So the minimum income limits are not as strictly enforced as the program income limits. And ultimately, it's the decision of the management company or the leasing team, I should say, during their lease screening, whether or not the household meets those minimum income amounts or requirements. There's no asset limit for rental, affordable rental opportunities. You could have significant assets in your bank accounts. You might be retired and you cashed out a 401k or something like that. We're still going to need to collect information related to these assets. So we're still going to need to verify your assets, even though there is no limit to the amount of assets that you can have to apply for this lottery. If income is generated from your assets, the income is going to be counted towards your max household income. Assets include checking, savings accounts, CDs, retirement accounts. We're going to count the net value of those 401ks or IRAs. Venmo or PayPal accounts, we're going to be asking for statements for those, even though you may not think of them as an asset. Stocks, bonds, real estate, you want to keep in mind, again, you can't own a home when you're looking to lease a unit or when you are about to sign a lease for an affordable unit, but any interest or equity that you have received from real estate would need to be counted. We do not need to have documents or verify assets such as jewelry, art, or cars, so any personal assets we don't need to have documentation for. So we've covered the eligibility criteria for the housing program and the lottery. Just a reminder again, if any questions have come up, so it looks like there's been a few more comparing the Bellingham property that we have as well. And it looks like Dave is talking with that person there, so I'll move on. So lottery eligibility. So as I mentioned earlier, if you're interested, you want to get your application in as early as possible to get the process started. We also wanted to, again, mention that you're able to apply for more than one bedroom size if you're interested in doing so. And so if you think you might be interested in both a one bedroom and a two bedroom, you would indicate that on your application. There's really no downside to doing that. But there is a potential downside if you only apply for that 1-bedroom unit and then you decide later that you may have been interested also in that larger 2-bedroom apartment. So apply for as many unit sizes, I should say, that you are interested in. So we're going to review your application and we'll contact you with any information that appears to be missing or incorrect. And so you'll have a second chance to go ahead and correct and complete the application and resubmit it as necessary. Most applicants do not submit a 100% complete application on their first try, and that's completely fine. The reasons behind that are really just because there's a lot of information that is needed and that is required of you when you're applying for this lottery. And also, sometimes you submit the application and it generates more questions from our compliance team. And an example of that might be you submit your bank statement and there's some bank deposits or there's something on your pay stub that requires further review or documentation from you. So it's completely fine. You'll be giving additional time to supply the additional information. So this is just why we encourage you to get the application in as soon as you determine that you're eligible for the lottery, or that you're interested in the lottery, I should say. So if we've reviewed your application and you're found to be eligible for the lottery, you're going to be sent a lottery application number in an email or by paper mail. So if you have an email address, we'll send it to you by email. If you don't, we'll mail it to you. And the application number is going to be in the form of A dot and then a sequence of 3 or 4 numbers. This is the number that's going to be drawn in the lottery, and it's meant to be an anonymous identifier. So your name is not called during the actual lottery. So it's not a ranking of any sort. It just corresponds to when your application was received. And so if you were the very first person to apply for the affordable housing lottery at Alexan, your number is going to be A.001. The letter that you received with that lottery application number is also going to confirm whether or not your household qualifies for local preference. And you'll have indicated on your application if you believe your household qualifies for local preference. If you live in Kingston, for example, and you will have submitted the necessary verification that the application calls for to confirm that preference. So local preference could apply to you if you live in Kingston, if you work in the town of Kingston, if you work for the town of Kingston, or in a business that is located in Kingston, or if you are the guardian of a child that goes to Kingston Public Schools. So up to 70% of the affordable units at Alexan will have a local preference, which means that some local preference households will get priority for those units compared to households who do not have local preference. But you also want to keep in mind that for the 2-bedroom and 3-bedroom units, household type is more heavily weighted. It's a more heavily weighted factor than local preference. So in determining your waitlist placement. So for example, if you're a type 2 household and you apply for a 2-bedroom unit, you're still going to have preference for that 2-bedroom apartment over a type 1, maybe a single person who has local preference and they applied for a 2-bedroom apartment. So in short, if you don't have local preference, you don't qualify for that, you should not be deterred at all from applying for this lottery. And more information about local preference can be found on page 18 of the information packet. Finally, the email or letter you receive with your application lottery number is also going to confirm the bedroom size that you applied for and whether or not you indicated a need for one of the disability or sensory accessible units. So everything will be confirmed there. If you see anything on that email or letter that doesn't look right to you, go ahead and contact us so we can get to the bottom of it. If at any point during this process you're found to be ineligible for the program, maybe you're over income, you own a home, whatever it might be, you're going to be informed by email or by mail. And we encourage you obviously to contact us with any questions on notices that you receive from us. So the lottery itself is going to be held virtually in the same format as a YouTube live session on June 13th at 6 p.m. And numbers will be drawn from a box, held up to the screen and recorded so everybody can witness that. You do not need to attend the lottery. You're not really going to know what your true placement is on the lottery live that day, because we still need to sort the preferences. So we still need to take a look at local preference, sort the house by household types and all of that. So, but during the lottery, every lottery number will be drawn and picked. Sometimes when we think of lotteries, we think there's one winner. That's not the case here. Our lotteries are held in order for us to establish the wait list for these units. So if a type 1 household is drawn first in the lottery and they have the first placement for a 2-bedroom unit, they're still going to be behind all type 2 households for that 2-bedroom wait list. So while in general it is more beneficial to have your number called as early as possible during the lottery, it may not necessarily be the deciding factor on whether or not you'll be moving forward to lease a unit at Alexan. Also, households who were entered into the lottery may be found ineligible or decide not to lease the unit further along in the process. So if your number is drawn later on in the lottery, you don't want to lose hope and think that you won't be able to move forward for these units. You may still have the opportunity to move forward and lease a unit at Alexan. So following the lottery, we're going to populate the waiting list. So we will then have to take into consideration household type, local preference, whether or not your household requires an accessible unit, and all of that. So we do our best to sort the lists and send you the waiting list as soon as possible. Typically, we have them sent out to you no later than the following morning after the lottery. So the list will be sent in the same way I've been talking about here, by email or by regular mail if we don't have an email address for you. So when you're reviewing that email following the lottery, you want to find your application number and see where you fall on the wait list. You should then have a better idea of whether or not you will be invited to move forward to the next step in the process, which is applying for a lease and doing your lease screening with the management or leasing office. So at this time, following the lottery and after we've established the wait list, we're going to connect the top households from each wait list with the management team or the leasing office. And your contact information will be provided to them, and you will also be giving the management team's contact information. So that step 2, which is applying for the lease, you can begin that process. So at this point, we at SEB have already completed the lottery and program eligibility screenings, but we have not screened for lease eligibility. The management company does so. And as part of their screening, like I mentioned very early on, they may be checking credit, rental history, criminal background to determine whether or not you're eligible to rent at the community. You want to be aware during this process that the management team may be inviting more households to complete the lease application and the lease screening than there are available units. So for example, at Alexan, there are 2 studio units, but 5 or more households might be invited from the wait list to complete lease screening for those 2 units. Management companies do this because often the process of leasing units is slowed down by households who don't qualify, so they just want to speed up the process by doing that. So it's important that you understand if you're leasing a unit right now, even if you're the first person on the wait list, you do not want to immediately inform your current landlord that you're breaking the lease because you're moving to Alexan in Kingston, because you have not yet been approved by the management company. So keep that in mind. Okay, so this is the point in the process really when you're completing your lease screening with the leasing office, that having a position near the top of the waiting list is particularly beneficial. And if you're the top household on the list, you have the first chance to reserve an affordable unit. So if you have the top position on the 1-bedroom wait list, for example, you will have first choice at reserving one of the affordable one-bedroom units at Alexan. This is true even if another applicant who's positioned behind you on the wait list gets their lease application in before you do. The management office needs to wait to see whether or not you're interested in the unit, and if you pass and are eligible for your lease screening. So you'll be able to tour the units, make a decision that's best for you based on the location of the unit in the building, when it will be available for occupancy, whatever variables or factors are important to you. You'll be able to take a look and just see if it works for you. The second household on the wait list would have second choice of the remaining units, etc. So our SEB program certifications are valid for 6 months. So if for any reason you move in more than 6 months after you submit your application for Alexan, you may need to submit updated income documentation for us to update your file. This probably won't be the case for Alexan, since I believe the units are expected to be available very soon, but just wanted to keep that in mind. Hopefully you only need to submit your income information once, but it could be that you need to submit further documentation later on. So once you've leased, you're eligible for everything. You've leased a apartment. You're done with screenings until the lease renewal date. And so at that point, we hope that you've been enjoying your year at Alexan, and you want to continue living there beyond your first year. And if you do, you would need to recertify your income either with SEB Housing or with the management office prior to your lease renewal. If during the year your income has increased and is now above 80% of AMI, that's fine. Households remain eligible for the affordable apartments as long as their household income doesn't exceed 140% of AMI. So on page 17 of the info pack, the 140% figures for the different household sizes are listed. But for example, if you're a household of 2 and you qualified for the lottery with an income at or below $89,500, the same household can make up to $125,300 at the time of the recertification in order to remain eligible to rent the affordable apartment. So just because your income increases during the year doesn't mean you won't be able to still qualify for the affordable program any longer. So that about covers what I wanted to highlight from the information packet and about this housing opportunity. Again, you can find the lottery application for the affordable apartments for Alexan Kingston on our website. I know that there's been some questions in the chat, but it looks like Dave is having the conversation there about a specific person's situation. So if there's anyone who has any questions about what was covered during this session tonight, please let us know. So I'll stick around for just a few minutes because I know there's a conversation going on here, but any questions about what we spoke about or what was presented, type them in there. All right, if there's no other questions, like I said, feel free to email us at info@sebhousing.com if any questions come up later on. And good luck in the lottery. Have a good night.